Hi, everyone. I'd like to do a shout out to our sponsor, Baco Diagnostics. Early detection is the single most important factor in improving patient outcomes. The Baco Diagnostics team recognizes how impactful a podiatric physician can be and remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing conditions of the lower extremity. Thanks to the unwavering support of their clients, Baco Diagnostics has been able to give back to the podiatric community for 16 years by providing podiatric educational resources and advocating for the position. Baco Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet. If you have not yet had the opportunity to utilize Baco Diagnostics services, get started today by sending an email to corporaterations@bacodiagnostics.com. The first 50 podiatry offices who request a starter kit will receive a Dean's Chat mug. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I am joined by my co-host, Joanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Joe. I had quite a week. I brought my props with me. I got my crutches.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Had my knee scopes. No problem. Piece of cake. How about you? How are you doing? You're in Dallas.
I am in Dallas, and we are in the middle of the APMA, American Podiatric Medical Association Conference. It has been an awesome kickoff, and it's so fun to run into so many different people. And yeah, living the dream.
Living the dream. Well, we are living the dream. Today, we have a wonderful guest, one of my former students from Barry University. I'd like to introduce Vilayvanh Saysoukha. Dr. Saysoukha, welcome to Dean's Chat.
Hi, welcome. Or thank you for having me, rather.
Oh, it's so great. So thankful you could make time and carve out of your schedule. I've been looking forward to doing this interview for a long time. I've been kind of watching your career ascend on social media. And so I can't wait to hear about all the great things you're doing.
Again, I'm so excited and honored, honestly, to be speaking to you both.
Sounds great. Well, let's go first names, if that's okay with you. Valai, Joe, and Jeff. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. Well, let me give you a little more formal introduction. Valai is a first-generation Laotian American and is the CEO and founder of Premier Foot and Ankle Centers of Tennessee. She has two practices, one in Murfreesboro and one in McMinnville. She's board certified by the American Board of Podiatric Medicine and the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. She's passionate about minimally invasive surgery, limb salvage, and deformity correction. She's experienced and navigated care in rural health communities with limited access, and that care has shaped her into the physician and surgeon she is today. She is proud to work with students and colleagues and her commitment to being an educator in our profession. And we'll talk about your role on the education committee of FABFAS in a little bit. Outside of work, you enjoy doing life with your wife, stepson, and 3 dogs, as well as weightlifting 5 days a week. And we're definitely going to talk about that a little bit too. So let me get the ball rolling. It seems like yesterday we were both at Barry University, and you got your master's degree prior to embarking upon your degree at Barry University School of Podiatric Medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that journey, how you ended up at Barry, and then how you ended up at the School of Podiatric Medicine?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So basically, I thought I was on the allopathic, osteopathic route after undergrad. And so after interviewing a few places, I kind of applied late. I got waitlisted and then eventually rejected. And so they recommended some type of post-bac or a master's degree. And so that's where I applied to 2 different programs, one in St. Louis, which was a master's of arts in biology, so a little bit different. And I was fascinated with how the Master's of Science of degree in biomedical sciences at Barry University mirrored the first 2 years of, medical school or dental school. And so that pretty much started my journey. It wasn't until I was finishing that first year of biomedical sciences program that I kind of had what I call a quarter life crisis at 25, where, ever since I was 16, I knew I wanted to be a physician of some sort. I just didn't know what kind. And up until then, I shadowed every specialty but podiatry, again, because it just wasn't in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, it wasn't anything well advertised, if you will. And I didn't know any podiatrists, of course. And so I spoke with my advisor, and he said, well, we have a PA program, we have a CRNA program, we have a podiatry program. And so I asked them, oh, tell me more about podiatry. And so I actually got set up to shadow Dr. Armstrong.
Oh, very good.
Right. And they're in one of the Barry clinics, and the rest is history. I fell in love with the gamut of pathologies you could treat in the lower extremity and the different ages of patients you could treat as well.
Dr. Armstrong was a great guy to have as a mentor, as he was into all things radiology.
Absolutely. And at that time, I was interested in interventional radiology, so that kind of helped me get connected with him as well, with his radiology experience.
Very good. So you spent 4 years at the college, school, and then you went on to do your residency in Margate, just up the road from Barry, up Weston area, Margate area. Tell us about your residency experience.
Residency was amazing. So my first, I want to say 6 months, my residency director was Dr. Brightstein. He's passed away since. But then from the last half of first year up until graduation, Dr. Alan McGill took over, which really turned the program around in the best way possible, especially with our access to rear foot and ankle.
Absolutely. We've had Dr. McGill on the Dean's Chat. He's wonderful. Joe, your thoughts? I mean, it's so interesting how students kind of stay in geographical areas sometimes and other times not.
Yeah, and I just want to also do a shout out to Dr. McGill. I was just talking to a student who's looking at trying to pick out where they want to go on externships, and couldn't say high enough things about Alan. He's just an absolutely outstanding guy and surgeon, which is a wonderful combination when you're teaching residents. So Valai, I'm glad that that's the experience that you had as well. I love what you had just said too about you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do, and you just hadn't even heard of podiatry as an option that was out there. If I'm understanding correct, did you have any exposure or shadowing prior to meeting Dr. Armstrong?
I did not.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, what an incredible person to have as your kind of first introduction to podiatry. I'm curious, was there something, the interventional radiology you had mentioned, you were already kind of gravitating a little bit towards? And again, one of the things that Jeff and I like to highlight is it's really remarkable how many different areas podiatry kind of covers. We have dermatology, we are not doing interventional radiology, to be transparent and clear on my wording, but we interact with it in such a way, and we get to work with people who help us get blood flow. So being able to kind of use some of those skills and interests absolutely have overlap. And then surgery, and I know that you have interest in MIS, and so we'll and expertise in that area. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, I think, as we go throughout the interview. But was there anything specific in those first early days that you had seen where you were like kind of had that aha moment, like, I think I could do this. Like, I actually really like this.
Basically, after shadowing Dr. Armstrong in the clinic for a week, I just knew, honestly, after the first day, based on the different pathologies that you saw in one day, whether it was derm or a sports injury or, something dermatology, or I mentioned dermatology, but and not limited to just adults, having that pediatric exposure I thought was awesome. Because before even the master's program, I thought maybe sports medicine, but I shadowed a sports medicine ortho. I shadowed an ortho, and the sports medicine ortho doc was happy, but the ortho doc seemed miserable. So that kind of balance of, are they happy? Their interactions with patients as well influenced me to kind of turn away from those practices. But I knew I wanted to do something hands-on. And once I saw that you could do, minor procedures in the office even, and let alone you can actually do, surgeries of the foot and ankle, I fell in love, honestly, after the first day.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Valai, before we start talking about different, MIS and different procedures and your consulting, you're very, very active, and your entrepreneurship with starting your practice, I wanted to talk about your mini BACO fellowship. BACO is a sponsor of Dean's Chat, of course. They've been very good to everyone in our profession, from students to residents to practitioners. What was it like as a resident and going through the typical resident curriculum to all of a sudden go up to Alpharetta, Georgia for a couple of weeks and be engrossed in dermatopathology?
Honestly, I had no expectations. I know of people who did it, but all they said was, it's 2 weeks and it's really what you make of it. Same with residency, same with schooling. You can somewhat control your experience by how proactive and engaged you want it to be. And so I wanted to make good use of the 2 weeks that I was there and pick their brains, the different pathologists that we work with. While I was there were kind of a transition with the company. So I'm not sure how the program is set up now, but again, you really got to be as hands-on or ask as much questions as you wanted to. And if you were more kind of hands-off, then you won't get as much out of the experience, just like with anything.
Yeah, when we had Dr. Wayne Bacaudic on Teens Chat, what the mind doesn't know, the eyes can't see. And in how they enlighten, and they seem to send these wonderful reports, but getting, the answers and the differentials are just fascinating to me. So I think it's a real benefit to podiatrists to have that opportunity to do the 2-week fellowship.
Definitely. And you even get to see the logistics side, when they get the shipments in, take the packages out, and each process with the lab techs and all that, which I thought was fascinating.
Joe, it's kind of your experience too in private practice, being introduced to the world of dermatopathology. We all know that early detection is the most important determination in improving patient outcomes. Bako Diagnostics remains committed to supporting you in your role as the first line of defense in diagnosing lower extremity pathologies. Bako Diagnostics, helping podiatric physicians keep America on its feet.
And exactly to your point, the behind the scenes, you don't know what you don't know. And all of the little things and tips that we can learn from each other and use them in any part of our practice can be so valuable. And I love that you had highlighted that, Valai, that it was very much learning, modern day learning for sure. You have to be invested in it. And, we're all lucky enough that we work with students that have chosen a graduate profession. So they are in this with a vested interest, that we're not having to drag them along. But to your point of, you have this 2 weeks, you might as well make the most of it and get the best that you can out of it. So I'm curious in terms of advice that you might give a young learner, maybe it's in something like a Bako fellowship or even just in their residency program. How could you give some tangible tips for them to really make use of their time?
So I've always been an introvert, very shy, very quiet, and throughout schooling and especially through residency, you have to learn to speak up and advocate for yourself. And people don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And don't be, ashamed or embarrassed to ask questions because you're there to learn. And I think it's better to risk, sounding foolish and ask probably a good question that someone else was thinking and just didn't have the nerve or the courage to ask. And once you do that over and over, and again, it takes a lot of courage. And once you do that, you feel that sense of accomplishment by, one, being brave to ask that question, and two, it wasn't that bad and you didn't have any, a horrible repercussion from asking a question, and three, you learned something along the way.
Yeah. I love that.
Absolutely. So I was looking at your CV, and it doesn't seem like your CV is so vast. You're obviously, you've got the entrepreneurial bug. You have your practice and you grow and you're interfacing with companies and you're learning new procedures. Were you always that inquisitive, Valai?
I definitely was. And again, I think it took some life lessons and experiences to come out of my shell and show what I had to offer. And also that, be humble at the same time. That was my upbringing, no one likes to know it all, but also, again, people don't know what you know until you show them, either through words or really through actions.
Now, you went to school in Memphis before going to Miami, and then you've landed in the Nashville area with 2 practices. Why Nashville?
Well, I was born in Nashville, so it's essentially home. My parents and myself grew up in Smyrna, so about 35 minutes outside of Nashville. They still live there, and so that accounts for my Murfreesboro location, that clinic.
Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, Joe, your thoughts. What direction should we go here? We got multiple directions.
I would love to kind of piggyback in what you just said about kind of being willing to come out of your shell a little bit. And what prompted this for me is I was just having a conversation maybe an hour ago with a now fourth-year student about learning how to learn new things. So again, as surgeons, we are constantly learning new things. You learn how to do something, but the famous colloquialism is, if you still practice the way you learn in residency, then you're out of date, right? So when you started learning MIS, was that something that was in your program? Because I believe that it was 2015-ish in that zone. Was that something that you were learning actively in that time, or was this new things that you continued to learn when you got out of your programs?
That's a great question. So it was not available in my program. I believe the newer generation of MIS, or third generation, started in around 2018 with the two-screw construct. And so around 2019 was when I was interested in, after seeing about a year of how it was going with other people and their results, and seeing that there are great outcomes. So I wanted to be an early adapter and offer that to my patients, which helped out because I had patients calling, asking about, even in 2019, how can they have a Haglund surgery, minimally invasive? So I did a little bit different than how it's done now, but it was just more of just shaving down the enthesophyte, minimally invasive, and ended up doing it bilateral at some point, or 1 foot at a time, and the patient is happy. And that just came from her calling around asking if anyone could do this minimally invasive.
Yeah, it's so interesting, again, as we watch the evolution. And I'm trying to remember back, the first time I saw the first presentation on MIS bunion surgery, it was probably 2019, actually, but it could have been 2020 even, only because I was watching it virtually. And I definitely remember that's when everything started going virtual. But I remember it was that thing where I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I kind of remember hearing something about this and it didn't go so well. So let's see what they have to say. Like, I'm going to go into this very open-minded. And when you see the x-rays and they describe the technique, I remember being like, okay, that has legs. Like, that's really interesting. But exactly to your point, I want to see how this plays out a little bit. I want to see kind of what everyone's experiences are, who's already kind of engaged with it, and we'll go from there. And it's been interesting to watch it continue to develop over time. And our students are always really interested in it because it's new and modern and exciting. And so I appreciate your thoughtfulness on that, in terms of, it's okay to start to continue to learn how to do things, even when you're outside of residency, breaking out of some of the comfort curve, as Dr. Loader talks about. It's not a learning curve, it's a comfort curve. You know how to do things. You're just applying new techniques in different ways. You know the anatomy, you know safe zones. You can follow principles of surgery and just do things a little bit differently. And it makes it really exciting. Surgery is not static, it's very dynamic, and it continues to evolve. So thank
Definitely.
you for
You're welcome. And that kind of part of me jumping on that technology is one of the mission for my company, the mission statement. One of the 3 tenets is innovation. And so we can, we learn the basics, the protocols of how to treat, plantar fasciitis. But again, you have to consider, and we don't learn this necessarily in residency unless we're in the private practices or the clinics, to see how each provider works up a patient and treat them. But there are socioeconomic factors that play a role. Mm-hmm. And again, I think I graduated back in 2018. I'm sure it could be better now, but that's one of the things where if I had residents, I would definitely, teach them that point, because that does affect your treatments. You know what you need the patient to do, but if they need to be at work because they're the sole provider, right, if they are on a fixed income, like, these are factors that affect treatment. And so we really try to stay innovative to offer our patients the best options, but also tailor their treatment to their needs, not just their condition.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly powerful point. Again, when we teach the textbook version of indications, contraindications, there's so much individual patient factors that are actually taken into consideration in the real world. And I remember even coming from California, a state that had a very different social support system for things like short-term disability, coming to Arizona where those policies were completely different. And remember having a very detailed conversation with a patient about a procedure that he wasn't going to be able to go back to work realistically with the kind of work that he did for 2 months. And he was just like, that's just not an option. And it's like, but you have this problem and I can fix it for you. You just have to, like, we can't do the surgery and you go right back to work. That's going to make you worse. But it was just, it was the first time. And again, I was far out of residency at this moment where you really, again, start to appreciate what our patients go through versus our expectations, and making sure that we're all on the same page and alignment in terms of what a successful outcome looks like, and what can I do to help maybe cut that time down, or is that just not realistic? And I appreciate those comments a lot.
You know, Valai, I was sitting with Dr. Ryan Scott. He's the fellowship director at CORE here in Phoenix. And we were talking about minimal incision surgery, and we were pulling up some x-rays and looking at the lack of bone-on-bone contact and all the things we learned about back in the old days. So you've seen it come a long way in 5 short years. Where do you think it's heading? What ultimately is going to be the end game for MIS?
That's the token question right there. And I've given about 6 different lectures nationwide about this. It's not going anywhere, that's for sure. And you're seeing more companies that, you thought, oh, well, they're really fixed on the 3-dimensional correction, more proximal, but they're seeing that there are great long-term results because you're leaving the periosteum and the capsule intact. You will get bone healing around, those margins. And again, the same principles still apply. You do have bone-on-bone contact. You can place the screws incorrectly, not purchasing the cortices and things like that. But I feel like it's here to stay. And the more they're doing more marketing now on MIS and the patient experience with patient testimonies. So once that happens, I think it's here to stay.
I think it is. I know our students are very interested in journal clubs and things evolve around that. So that's fantastic. Joe, anything else on MIS on your end?
Oh man, we could talk about it all day, but no, there's so many other fun things that I want to talk to Valai about that I will let you keep moving.
Okay. Well,
don't give me that opening, Jeff. I'll take it.
I know that's true. All right. I'll help move us along to the next topic. So Valai, one of the things we always talk about with students, just sidebar conversations in the hall or with residents at meetings, everybody wants to know how you get involved with doing studies, assessing different types of products, whether they're wound care products, surgical products, becoming a potential consultant for companies in the wound care space or an orthopedic area. And you've been very successful at that. And I think a lot of that has to come from your personality and your drive and your theme of innovation. You naturally are attracted to that. How did you get involved with all these companies to the point where you're representing them and speaking for them at meetings and using their product?
Well, it really comes down to word of mouth, like you said. I think once you work with one person and they see that you're, easy to work with, you also practice evidence-based medicine. You're not just throwing the product on anyone and everyone. You have an algorithm of your treatment plan. And also, like you said, being able to communicate well with others about the product and obviously have an experience with the product. But I would like to think that a lot of my speaking engagement invitations and kind of getting familiar with other companies have started with the American Society of Podiatric Surgeons. Once I became the education chair, we're responsible for providing educational content to our members and non-members. We do just about a monthly webinar that's free for members and non-members with 1 CECH credit. And you kind of reach out to companies that way. And I've done a lot of work with startup companies, and I think they talk to each other as well, especially when they're part of a big innovation group and they have grants and things like that. And they'll say, oh, Dr. Saysoukha likes to stay on top of new technologies. She would be interested in hearing your spiel, and it kind of goes from there.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's true. I mean, you are in the middle of it if you're in the education committee of one of the podiatry societies. So that does make a lot of sense. But still, it's not easy to do. I mean, a lot of things have to come together. Patient population, your potential for opportunities to use products. I think that's all just a big package, and then you are providing that. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much.
Joe, what else would you like to talk about? Consulting? Any additional?
I guess the only other question we get, students and sometimes even residents will ask, how do you get involved? Or again, you covered some of that, but what I would love again is if you could provide some tips, like how would you start that first? Hey, I think I might want to get involved with some of these educational events. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's wanting to figure out how they get started in those roles?
That's a great question. I think it depends on, are we looking at the wound care space? Are we looking at the more surgical kind of orthopedic space? Because those are two different routes, to be honest. With bigger companies, just to stay neutral with names, with bigger companies, like hardware companies, it's a lot harder. Usually they want you to use their hardware, for example, and have experience and good outcomes. That's the thing, not just using X-fixes and plates and screws everywhere on anyone and everyone, but having good patient outcomes and a good reputation amongst your peers. Usually that's a 4 or 5 year process. So you're looking at the long game, which makes sense. If you want someone to represent your company, speak about the product, you want someone who's going to be a good surgeon, able to communicate and also have good outcomes and experiences with the product. In the wound care space, it's not as long, especially if you're doing wound care daily, weekly, and things like that. So again, depending on how your patient demographic is in your practice, if you're seeing a lot of wounds like I do, naturally, it's easy to start using that company, especially if it's already approved in the hospital, or if it's not. I've been known to be a champion for these products. If we can, again, sometimes it's down to just numbers for hospitals, not necessarily the research, the evidence-based medicine. If it's not on contract, they don't care if it's cheaper or more expensive. They just want to go what's on contract. So that's a whole nother talk. We can dive into it if you want, but that's kind of that administrative side, I think, is what's easy to cause burnout when you have kind of red tape you have to go through, and that the product will work well with the patient, or if you've used it in another facility and they won't allow it at another facility, that's frustrating. Yeah. The other thing would be, for myself, even as a podiatry student, I signed up to be a mentor on, I think it's the AAC's PM website or something like that. And still a DPM mentor that day, but I always make sure to tell everyone you can reach out to me through email, Instagram, LinkedIn. And again, it's all about connections sometimes too, getting connected with the right person to kind of lead you towards that route of consulting or getting involved in clinical trials.
I think that's such a great topic about advocating for your patient, putting our patients first, what their needs are, and ensuring that those needs are met to get the best outcomes you can. It is a fine line, and you have to push it with administrators sometimes, and it's not easy, but really at the end of the day, it's worth the effort to advocate for those products and those scenarios for the betterment of our patients.
Definitely. And, there's no harm there. You might be a thorn in their side if you keep advocating for one product after the other. But again, it boils down to you're advocating for your patient.
And I think that's also why that evidence-based medicine component of this is really valuable. So again, if you're using something and you're seeing great results, figuring out how can we do something concrete to showcase this, because just again, personal experience with something, it is hard to be a champion. Like, oh, but I've used it and it's great, and this is why it's great. If we can't really, quote unquote, prove why, even if it's, again, not on contract, why it might actually truly improve the outcome, we'll have a much better chance of making that case for our patient when we do have evidence to support it. So I appreciate that you had commented on that earlier in the interview, as well as this idea of excellence. Like, yeah, if you want to be a champion for something, you have to be really good. You have to have great outcomes, and that means that you need to do it to be able to say those things. So I appreciated both of those.
And I've been that person who would put together a little PowerPoint just so they can have something, not just, a text or an email saying, oh, I want this product because it works, or I saw it at a conference and I want to try it. It's more like, look, I've actually used this product at another facility where it's okay to use it, and these are my outcomes. And, that kind of helps, but still, you still may get a no at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And absolutely. I always thought no today doesn't always mean no tomorrow, but you got to set the stage. So,
that's true.
Very good.
No is the first word of the negotiation, Jeff.
That's right. There you go. I like that.
I like that too.
I'll remember that one, Joe. So you give back, obviously. That old adage that, if you need something done, give it to the busiest person. You've gone so far, you have a Fit Feet in Nashville that you headed up. Mm-hmm. And, you've given back at ASPS. Have you always been a volunteer? Have you always had that in the background, helping others in any way that you can, it seems?
I have, and it goes back to teenage years when, again, I'm a first generation American. And so I kind of had to learn everything along the way, from applying to college, what a scholarship was. And so I didn't know anything about volunteering until around that time where I was interested in medicine. And so I volunteered at Vanderbilt as a teenager in the oncology unit for peds. So I knew I didn't want to do that. I thought I was heading towards peds onc, but that experience told me no. But honestly, my experience at Barry was great. We had a lot of opportunities to volunteer, and the big that I was matched with, she was big into volunteering, and I think she got an award for it when she graduated, and I kind of followed in her footsteps. And also with dermatopathology, speaking of, one of my classmates and I started the first student chapter of the American Society of Podiatric Dermatology. I don't know if that still exists, but we were very proud of that, establishing it at Barry, at least.
That's fabulous. Very good. I wanted to shift gears a little bit, because when I was going through your CV, we all have our professional story, right? But you are a weightlifter, and 5 days a week, that's a lot, right? I mean, I've got a tonal machine. I'm lucky if I get 2 or 3 days a week. But tell us about that a little bit, your interest, how you got into it, and your passion for it.
Well, I'm by all means not a professional or anything like that, not a power lifter, but it started out in high school when I played basketball. I did quit after freshman year, but that was my first time in a weight room, honestly, and I loved it. Just that feeling of being strong and the endorphin rush and the mobility you can get after. I started picking it up again about a year ago. I was really getting burnt out, to be honest, and I just wanted to give it a try, and I wanted to do something that made me uncomfortable. And so I hired a personal trainer at the gym, and that opened my eyes to what I could physically and mentally do. It's a mental workout as well, weightlifting, especially leg day. And after seeing that I could mentally get through the hurdle of, oh, I can't do that, that's too hard, I'm so out of shape, and doing it, or even failing it, but trying, and the next week trying again and succeeding, it changed my physical health. It changed my mental health. Leading up to that, I became a diabetic, type 2. And again, that just changing my lifestyle, because I was just constantly on the go, commuting at least 2 hours round trip to my rural clinic at the time, because I had a non-compete. And I just had the one clinic at the time, so it pushed me out of my county. And so whenever I did eat, you ate what was available, which is usually junk. And that led to my diabetes diagnosis. Within 3 months, it went from a 9.9 to a 5.4. And my primary was like, how can we reproduce that in other patients? And I told her my motivation is I do not want to be the patient that has, amputations and, kidney disease and retinopathy. And we see it day to day in our patients. So I want to be a good role model for my patients as well. And I'll give them personal antidotes on, diet and nutrition when it comes to diabetes, and also a big proponent of telling women, regardless of diabetes diagnosis or not, to weight train for longevity of bone health and muscle health. And the more muscle mass you have, research shows you have more insulin receptors, so you become less insulin resistant.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. One is diet. The other is more about the weightlifting. But what would be one tip of advice you would give to a newly diagnosed type 2 diabetic diet from a diet perspective? Do you have rules you follow, or is there a program you follow, or how'd you do that? That's a tremendous change in your A1C over a few months.
Definitely. Well, honestly, the American Diabetes Association has wonderful free content on nutrition. And with our fingertips, you can go on TikTok. I mean, again, and Instagram, but there's bad advice out there too. So you really have to make sure you're listening to, a certified dietitian or nutritionist versus just a gym bro, as we like to call it. But what I've learned is that lean protein, is very important. And then carbs are not bad. It's really, and I think that's the first thing that people want to throw out is carbs. It's just a matter of what kind of carbs, the amount of carbs, and really the order that you eat your food, to be honest. If you eat your protein and fiber first, then your complex carbs. I find that with roasted potatoes, my blood sugar does not spike. And I wear, a CGM still, even though I've been controlled, for the last 3 years in the 4 to 5 range.
I like that. The sequence that you eat makes a difference. That's important.
It really does.
Wow. Joe, go ahead.
Like the whole idea of low glycemic foods. Again, it's interesting. Like the more you start to piece it, you had mentioned longevity history, and this is something that recently has been coming. Somehow I got into an algorithm for this, and I have to say I don't mind. I'm actually really appreciative right now of the algorithm. Like, oh, you're right. I do want to hear about this. But it is really interesting. And you had mentioned women's health specifically, the things that we kind of forget. And you had also mentioned, Valai, it's so easy to fall into bad habits because we all are busy and we live these lives. And we talked about in the beginning of the interview, our patients are people, and they are living their life, and they're trying to do the best that they can with the parameters that are part of their life. And so the more I can relate to them in some of these experiences, the more I can have that personal connection and the more trust that we build. And I love that you had mentioned that you'll have those vulnerable moments where you will share your own experiences. And I'm curious if there's anything that you've seen in that exchange that's been really impactful.
Definitely. For the people that it really resonate with them, when they come back for a 3-month follow-up, they'll say, guess what? My A1C is lower. And I took your advice on, adding more lean protein, and even snacking is not bad. The 000 Greek yogurt is my go-to. I mean, you can, if you're craving, I'm a big ice cream dessert lover. And so I would tell them, and a lot of them are too, they'll say, oh, I have a sweet tooth. I'm in the South, so we love our food and all that, our bad foods. But, taking the 000, zero sugar, zero carbs, 0 grams of fat, or no, it's not fat, but either way, high protein Greek yogurt, add like some semi-sweet dark chocolate chips, and you have your dessert fix. Little things like that, they'll say, I've tried. Or even with wound healing, nutrition, I think, is something we know. We just don't really know how to tell them. Oh, you can say, oh, eat better. But what does that mean, doc? Even, introducing yourself or being connected with your local nutritionist, I think is very impactful. And a lot of insurance will cover that service. And a lot of insurances will cover gym memberships too, from what I hear.
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't know that. I knew about the nutritionist, and I love our nutritionists. Again, it's the little things that, and you can apply this to bone healing, wound healing, overall longevity, mental health. There's so much when we start to look at some of the dietary influence on our life and how it impacts us. That again, the more I start to look into it, the more I realize I don't know any of this stuff. So let me get the experts in that do. So again, I appreciate that when you had mentioned the dietitian. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, you're good. So Valai, I think one of the scariest things for somebody who's aspiring to get in shape is to go into a gym and look at this massive weights and bars and machines, and you don't know how often you should lift. You don't know what you should do. You don't know your technique. You don't know the reps. You don't know the weights. And you sought out a personal trainer.
I did. And it wasn't...
Did that solve a lot of those problems?
It did. And again, it was relatively inexpensive. And so that kind of helped too, because I wasn't sure if I would like that. I always liked working out alone and kind of into the zone. And I've never liked fitness classes or anything like that, which I still haven't tried, but kind of piquing my interest to try something different and out of the norm to get different results. So that was my take on it is, I've been in and out of the gym. I want real results. I want to feel good. And I think going this route and no harm. If I don't like it, I can always cancel. After doing that for 6 months, I was pretty committed. And so I stopped. And then, I found reliable sources, honestly, on social media, even of people who are certified, personal trainers. And there's a lot of good free content. There's some bad ones too. So you have to kind of, just like with anything, do thorough research. And I think us in the medical field can spot someone who may not know what they're talking about or is contradicting the general mass of personal trainers, for example. But you really do get addicted to how you feel afterwards. And after a while, just being able to squat and bend over and not have any huffing and puffing. I'll honestly will take stairs in the hospital. I find that works pretty well, and park a little bit further away than I usually would, just to get more steps in. Because in the clinic we're sitting, even in the exam room, I think most of us are sitting versus standing when we're talking to our patients. So we're more sedentary. One thing I've kind of started with amongst friends is, every hour, let's do 15 to 20 body weight squats just in front of our desk.
Love it.
Yeah.
We need to start instituting that at the college, Joe.
There you go.
We can totally start a campaign, Jeff, and we can put it on social media. It'd be great.
Yeah. They say movement is medicine. It gets your blood flowing. It wakes you up. You don't have to get another cup of coffee.
Yeah, and the tagline,
world is my gym. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff.
Well, remember our tagline for the new branding campaign is "Podiatrists move the world," and so movement is medicine. I love that.
There you go.
So much truth to that. Joe, I was thinking maybe we do a little rapid fire. What do you think?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right.
They're fun rapid fire. They're not hard rapid fire.
Okay.
Absolutely. So you're going to go on vacation. You got a long weekend. It's not podiatric related at all. Where are you headed?
Long weekend, not podiatric related at all. I would love to go to Italy. I've never been to Europe, and I minored in Latin, so I was a nerd. So just to see Roman history and even see if I can translate some of the Latin that would be all over the place. I would love to visit Italy.
That's awesome.
Oh, I do. I love that too. Now, you also had mentioned, and I am a sweet tooth person myself, what would be the food that you'd be the most excited about trying in Italy? Because there's a lot of really awesome things you can pick from.
You're absolutely right. And I would say probably just something simple like a carbonara.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
I'll let you go, Jeff. I'll pick another one.
All right. So you have 3 dogs. Tell us about the dogs. Favorite dogs.
So my wife has 2 that came with her. They're both rescues. One's a Pekingese Shih Tzu mix. His name is Biscuit. The other one's a Chihuahua Yorkie. mix, and her name is Liza. And I actually had a dog with me throughout undergrad, master's, podiatry school, residency, and she passed away a couple of years, but I had her for about 16 years. So she traveled all over with me. She's gone. She was a boxer mutt. I have a 2.5-year-old French bulldog, and he's a service dog. So he goes to my clinics with me and sometimes the hospital.
Oh my gosh, how good.
And patients love him. I mean, he's the sweetest dog. He's never growled over food, over toys. He just loves every living thing.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Isn't that amazing? Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's a busy household.
It is.
At the APMA, they have the Podiatry. So I'm going to totally go over there. And again, I will have somebody snap some pictures of me snuggling some 4-legged furry friends.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to get some scrubs for Hamlet, my French bulldog that's in the clinic. I think that would just...
What a great name!
Hamlet, yep.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so I'm going to go a different route for this question. Give us a book that was impactful in your life. Could be fiction, nonfiction. If you can't just pick one, you can pick 2.
A book that was impactful. The first thing that comes to mind, and this is probably a generational thing, is Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah.
I've read that so many times. And again, you have some Latin references in there with the spells. So I think that's what made me love it as well. And just the magic and the fantasy of it all. Another book would be one that I read in undergrad. I forget the full title, but it has to do with a Hmong Lao girl. And so Hmong people are kind of a subset of an Asian population that was kind of displaced all the way from Eurasia, Russia, to China, down to they settled in the northern parts of Vietnam and Laos. Laos is where my family comes from. But it gave you a good glimpse of, someone from eastern part of the country. They moved to California, where Western medicine collides with culture, and this particular young girl suffered from epilepsy, and that got me interested in medicine, and not just the physical part of treating patients, but also the cultural, social factors you have to think about. Because a lot of times the treatments would butt heads with their cultural practices, because they were more tribal, not so much first, second, third generation into it. So they were really close to their cultural roots, if you will. So I forget the full title. It's a long title, but I have a photographic memory. I have the picture of the front of the. I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Valai, I think there's a Hmong, Hmong population in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, yeah. They love the mountainous areas. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Very good. I don't have any more questions, Valai. I am so grateful that we were able to connect, and it was just such a wonderful interview and finding about your career. And it's been a pure joy watching the ascension of your career, if you will.
No, it's been great. I'm again honored for both of y'all having me. I've listened to a few of the podcasts now, not just before I knew I was getting on, but just seeing you, Dr. Jensen or Jeff. And kind of also I've been following you because you had a pretty big impact on me when you're our dean.
Well, thank you very much. Joe, any last words?
No, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you, and I look forward to meeting in person at some event in the future, I'm sure. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, and I look forward to meeting you as well in person.
Valai, we're going to send you a Dean's Chat mug. Get your day rolling before you start lifting and seeing patients and going crazy all day.
Perfect.
All right. Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please give us a 5-star rating, or perhaps even leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. Joe and I will continue to bring you leaders in the podiatric profession. And until next week, everybody, cheers.
Cheers.